So today we're going to read kind of a longish Bible story that's not about what to think. It's not about what to believe. It's not really about a miracle, although there's something pretty miraculous in it. It's a story about an encounter that changes. And it changes Jesus, it changes the disciples, and it changes the woman. It's a story that travels the spiritual path from realize to restore to renew. And along the way, we're going to see how people show up, pay attention, collaborate with God, and release the outcome. So let's jump in. When Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard Jesus is making and baptizing more disciples than John, although it wasn't Jesus himself, it was his disciples that were baptized, he left Judea, which is the south, and headed back toward Galilee, which is the north. That's like getting from LA to, San Luis Obispo. But he wanted to avoid the 101. Oh, no. Not that. But he had to go through Samaria. This is not true. He did not have to go through Samaria. Most of the time, Jews did not go through Samaria because Samaritans and Jews not so friendly with each other. So they would go up the east side on the Jordan Valley to get back to the Galilee, or they would go, up the west side by the coast route to get there. But Jesus had to go through Samaria. Had to go through Samaria. So he came to a Samaritan city called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. So here's a Jewish thing sitting in the middle of a Samaritan place. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired out by his journey, was sitting by the well. It was about noon, and that's going to matter. A Samaritan woman comes to draw water, and Jesus says, "Please give me a drink." And his disciples have gone off to the city to buy food. That's what the Bible tells us. So Jesus goes through Samaria. Technically, he goes by choice. There are other routes. He doesn't actually have to. But the writer wants you to understand that he had to in the sense of being driven. Jesus has to do this because something essential to his mission in the world is going to happen. It's a fairly provocative move. Most Jews would take one of those other two routes to avoid going through Samaria, but it is a theological necessity for Jesus. The mission requires it. Because this stop in Sychar is going to be the first time Jesus lives into his mission. And what is his mission? Just a few verses earlier, John 3:16. For God so loved the world. The world. Jesus is in the other space, the space of them. The space of the people we don't like. Not just the people we don't like, but the people who got the whole religious thing wrong. And I know we often think that, right? I was raised in a church, in a church and a home that didn't have a lot to negative to say about other religions. But from time to time, I would hear some very weird things that people thought about Catholics because they were other. And they got it wrong. So here is Jesus. And a woman shows up. And this woman is a member of the non-conforming Samaritans. And that's important because it makes her an outsider to Jews. She's a rebellious, ignorant, persisting in their wrongness outsider. And Jesus shouldn't even be in her presence, certainly not alone with a woman, much less engaging her in what we're about to see is a theological conversation. Furthermore, she's curious, she's engaged. He's speaking to her as if she has an education and as if she has something worth listening to. A curious mind is very appealing. An open mind is very appealing, especially to Jesus, because it means someone is open to hearing what he is hoping to communicate. And Jesus goes where he needs to go in order to prove his point that God so loved, hence he is in Samaria. Because for John, the gospel writer John, faith in Jesus is less about, I believe Jesus lived, I believe Jesus died, I believe Jesus was there, I believe what Jesus said, I believe in the miracles. It's about an encounter with Jesus. It's about having a genuine encounter with Jesus. And this encounter, you're going to hear it in a minute, reflects the realize, restore, renew trip through the posture of showing up, paying attention, collaborating with God, and releasing the outcome. So, Jesus shows up, a woman shows up, and now there's some paying attention. The Samaritan woman said to him, which is really fascinating, Jesus has said, give me a drink. Customarily, a woman who is getting water at noon, we'll talk about that in a minute, would not have anything to say to Jesus. Because she's not supposed to talk to him, he's not supposed to talk to her, and nothing good can come of this. And I don't know if she brings him water or not, I assume she does. And she comes over and asks, how is it that you, a Jew, ask a drink of me, a woman of Samaria? And I think she's curious. I don't think this is a belligerent conversation. I don't think she's seeking to start a fight. And then just in case we don't know, John reminds his readers, Jews don't share things in common with Samaritans. In other words, they don't even, it's kind of like the water fountains in the South before integration. And Jesus answered, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that's saying to you, give me a drink, if you knew what you were encountering, you would have asked, and he would have given you living water. And the woman said, sir, you don't have a bucket, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? And living water is moving water. Okay, in the well is still water, and living water is like a creek or a river. But it's also a metaphor, isn't it? Are you greater than our ancestor Jacob? So she's aligning herself with him now. And the Samaritans and the Jews do have this ancestor Jacob in common, who gave us the well with his sons and his flocks to drink from it. And Jesus said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But those who drink of the water that I will give them will never be thirsty. The water that I give will become in them a spring of water gushing up to eternal life. Gushing up to eternal life. Now, she says, well, give me this water so I don't ever have to come back here. And I'll tell you in a minute why she didn't want to come back there. But Jesus is paying attention to her, and he's drawing her attention. Now, in key encounters with Jesus throughout John, there's very often a talking past each other, and there is no understanding. And sometimes there is an understanding, but it's not a happy one. Today's story, we have an understanding. I mean, she has a minute to not quite get what he's saying, but she catches on pretty quick, and it has a happy ending. So she's paying close attention to Jesus. What might we want to be paying attention to in this story? The Samaritan woman is often presented as an immoral person. For some reason, biblical commentators over the years really love to look into that stuff. They're really kind of obsessed with that stuff. But the number of her husbands, first of all, is not a comment on her morality. She lives in a culture where the only way for a woman to survive is to have a father, a brother, or a husband. That's why the Bible everywhere, from beginning to end, says the people at the top of your needy list are orphans and widows. They're at the top of the list of people who need help. Your giving should first, right off the top, go to orphans and children. And this woman has been a widow or a divorcee, and she would not have divorced her husband. She couldn't have divorced her husband. He could divorce her. But she may well have had multiple widowing experiences. This is not about her sin. Jesus doesn't comment on it except to say, good for you for telling me the truth. You know, the guy you're living with now, you've had 5 husbands, the guy you're living with now isn't even your husband. You speak the truth. You are being honest with me. He does not condemn her. He doesn't call what she's doing a sin. And he doesn't forgive her. He doesn't need to forgive her because there's nothing to forgive. She is, however, and this is what I'm talking about when I say the thing about the getting water at noon, she's isolated by her marital status because the rest of the culture does not think the way Jesus thinks. All of this may have just happened to her. The most likely case is she is a victim of a series of things, and now her only recourse is to live with a man who does not give her the dignity of marriage or any of its advantages. And for her troubles or her good luck or bad luck, she is stuck getting her water at noon. Women, even to this day, from villages in all kinds of places, go to get water early in the morning and then again early in the evening. The only person who goes in the middle of the day is the woman who is not welcome in the circle of other women, the place where bonds are made, the place where favors are traded, the place where people learn healing and recipes. She is separated from her support system by the prejudices of the world. And Jesus' only comment about that is to appreciate her forthrightness. The woman said, "Give me this water." And Jesus says, "Go call your husband and come back." He's inviting her to tell the truth. And she does. And then she says, "I see that you are a prophet." And isn't that the way? If his first move had been to condemn her or to remind her of her moral position outside the culture, which he does none of those things, why would she draw near? She draws near because he understands something about her, and the only thing he has to say about it is, "Thank you for being honest about that." That's it. That's it. He is not condemning her, and so now she enters fully into this encounter through what can only be described as a theological conversation. And then she says, "I know the Messiah is coming. I know the Messiah is coming, who is called Christ. When he comes, he will proclaim all things to us." And Jesus says, "I am, ego eimi, I am." This is a phrase, ego eimi, in Koine Greek, old-fashioned Greek, is John's key phrase. Just like in the Gospel of Mark, the key phrase is immediately. In John, the key phrase is "I am." And the first of many times that it shows up in this gospel is with this woman. He hasn't even said this to the disciples yet. There's something about her openness, her readiness to hear, and he speaks, he displays, he reveals himself to her. She doesn't just show up in a passive way. She is a robust, thoughtful, confident theologian who engages Jesus in a deeper conversation than anybody else in this gospel. We are listening in on a fairly sophisticated conversation between two people who have given this some thought. And the result is Jesus reveals himself as who he is. I am the Messiah. I am the Messiah for the very first time. And so this woman, for her willingness, her openness, her courage to be in Jesus' presence, naked, true, fully engaged, not covering anything up, her reward is a revelation. She has what we call a theophany. A theophany. God reveals God's self to her in Jesus. And then, because we wouldn't want this great thing to last too long, every story needs a little trouble in it, the disciples came. And They were astonished to find him speaking to a woman. Why anybody is surprised about anything Jesus does, I don't know, but it's not unreasonable for them to be surprised that by himself he is talking to this woman. And he shouldn't be doing that, and she shouldn't be doing that. Everybody's going to lose. But none of them had the nerve to say anything. They don't say, well, what do you want, to her? And they don't say to Jesus, well, what do you think you're doing? Why are the disciples portrayed this way? You know, it's understandable. They're in the middle of the territory where they shouldn't be. Jesus is talking to her intensely. You know, do we even have to ask ourselves why the disciples are like this? It's because Jesus has drawn her into the inside of the circle, but she's an outsider. They're insiders. They belong in the inside circle. He has now unconscionably drawn a woman who is other in so many ways. First of all, she's a woman, into the inner circle. Now, you know, what you got to notice is, first of all, the disciples always do this. I mean, they just not the sharpest tool in the shed. On the other hand, they are there for a purpose, and I am grateful for it. Because Jesus does not abandon them. Nowhere in any of the Gospels or even any of the traditions does Jesus say, I got to get me some new disciples. These guys are hopeless. They don't get it. They never get it. I need somebody who gets it. He doesn't do that to them. They love him. They have left everything to be with him. He's their guy. And they are his. And then, this is my favorite verse, 28. The woman left her water jar and went back to the city. She left her water jar and went back to the city. She left her water jar. There are no pointless details in the gospel. She's left her water jar, probably so she can get back faster, and she goes back to the city and says to the people, come, see a man who told me everything I've ever done. So that's kind of that's the miracle, but it's buried in the story because it's not the primary thing. He can't be the Messiah, can he? Is that even possible? And they left the city and they were on their way to him. So the woman leaves her water jar, and we're supposed to notice that because it should strike you as strange, because she has received the living water that Jesus provides. She is not forced to receive the living water that Jesus provides, but once she understands what Jesus is talking about, and it only takes her one exchange to get it, she's willing. Her previous source of security, men, husbands, she doesn't need that anymore. She's safe with Jesus. She has the living water that she needs. Now, notice what is said, but also notice what is not said. She goes to her friends and she says, come and see a man who told me everything about myself. And here's the unspoken part. And loved me anyway. Come and see a man who told me everything about me. Say it with me. And loved me anyway. There it is. She realizes it, and it changes everything. I am loved no matter what. Go ahead and say that to yourself, real quiet. Now say it a little louder. I am loved no matter what. Now if you're courageous, go ahead and say it. You don't have to shout, but say it like you want me to hear your voice. I am loved. Thank you. Yes. What else is there to say? So I'm going to sit down in a minute. But in case you didn't quite get that point, I just want to remind you that sometimes our own behavior denies what we know, denies what we want. We are full of inner contradictions and outer contradictions. But if we let it, this one story can be the whole gospel to us. If we show up, if we pay attention, if we collaborate with God, and if we let go of the outcome, which means we haven't decided what it's going to mean to meet Jesus. We're just going to be there. And then, like this flawed, intense, thirsty at the well woman, we become change makers in the way of Jesus, the compassionate change maker. Isn't it just the best thing ever? I love it. Amen.